all the generational karma has now led up to this point. People like Tony Blair, Bill Gates, and all the other people, they're actually projections from this deep ocean of consciousness as waves on the ocean, because we've got unresolved karma. To get through to the other side, it means time to go now within. We've got to end the game inside ourselves, and we've got to unite at a different frequency.
Welcome to the Staying Free podcast. Apologies, it's been a little while since my last episode. Things got a little bit hectic in my life, so I had to slow down on the podcast for a little while I worked through a few things in my own life. But I do have a few really awesome guests lined up for the show, and these are conversations that I really think will resonate with you guys. So I'll try to get back to a regular posting schedule, but as you know, I do put quite a lot of time into these episodes, crafting the intros, editing them up. And also, I don't like to have conversations just with anyone on the show. I don't like to just fill a spot. I like to bring conversations that I think genuinely going to offer value. So I hope that you'll forgive there being the occasional gap between episodes, because for myself, I often feel like that is the trade-off in order to bring quality conversations. Which brings me to this conversation, which I'm finally ready to release, with Hoshin. Hoshin is a yoga teacher with 36 years of spiritual exploration, who now dedicates his life to his retreat in Scotland and sharing insights on the heart's connection to consciousness. Hoshin believes that the heart serves as a bridge between physical and spiritual dimensions, offering profound healing and wisdom. He aims to help others discover their essence and live in harmony by deepening their connection to a universal divine principle. So as you probably gathered from that little bio there, this conversation definitely resides very much within the spiritual realm. But Hoshin is someone who is very much on board with the ideas of freedom and very in tune to the nature of the world and the way in which the mainstream paradigm has a tendency to oppress the individual. So just from talking to Hoshin, I can tell that he's definitely done the deep work when it comes to identifying within his own life the areas where he can become more connected, become more free and sovereign, and all the other things that we talk about quite often in this show. So I thought he was the perfect guest. I heard him initially on Parallel Mike's podcast, so I reached out to Mike and said I really wanted to have Hoshin on the show. So I will put that conversation between Parallel Mike and Hoshin in the description too, if you want to go and listen to that episode. But I really think that these conversations are the ones that we need to be having right now. A lot of people right now are just getting so sucked in by whatever the latest psyop is, whether you're in favor of it or whether you're against it and fighting on the other side of that. I just think that the energy of the world right now seems to be shifting to this incredibly heightened state. And on one side of that, you've got people who are using that heightened state to go more into the spirituality, using that high frequency state to actually elevate their consciousness. And on the other side of that, I think you've got people who are really just getting kind of like drowned by that. So this conversation for me really serves as a reminder for people to kind of come back to their center, come back to reason, come back to rationality, and to try to reconnect with the meaningful things in life. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Hoshin. If you do, I really encourage you to find someone in your life who you can share this episode with. Maybe that's a friend, maybe it's a family member, someone that you think is going to get value from this. If it's been of value to you, maybe it will be of value to them as well. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, you can also give it a 5-star review in whichever podcast app you're using. If you're new here, make sure you give the pod a subscribe for future episodes. And also remember to check out some of the previous episodes as well. And finally, I'll just give a quick mention to the Fountain app. If you're not already listening to the podcast on Fountain, really recommend you do that. That will allow you to stream stats as you listen, which will help contribute towards the show. And also you can leave a comment there in the form of a boost, which I'll always read out on the show. So I've got a few boosts here from the previous episode. Looks like Piers has gone on a boost frenzy here. He's given me 4 boosts here saying bullish as fuck LFG with a bunch of emojis. And then he sent 2,100 stats saying, always love the Staying Free episodes, but especially when the great guy Swan is on. Bullish as fuck LFG. Another Freedom LFG with another 2,100 sats. And another 2,100 sats with thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Piers. Really appreciate all of those boosts. And finally, just a boost with a salute emoji from V3 Sperring with 100 sats. Thank you for that 100 sats as well. Really do appreciate you guys contributing towards the show. And of course, not to mention the regular contributors who I have listed on the show notes who support me through Buy Me a Coffee as well. All right, without further ado, let's get into the episode with Hoshin. Hoshin, welcome to the Staying Free podcast. I obviously heard you first of all, as I was saying outside of this conversation, I heard you first of all on Parallel Mike's podcast, where you had a really great conversation over there. And I'm going to link to that one here as well in case people want to check out that conversation, because that definitely gave me a really good primer as to what you're about. But, you know, during that conversation, I just really resonated with the stuff that you were saying, things that you were talking about. And I think you're a very interesting person. And, you know, certainly someone who I would like to learn more about and learn more about, your backstory and then your life philosophy and everything that you're building as well with HeartMind and living out there in Scotland. So I won't go into too much here because obviously we're going to get into this. But first of all, do you want to just give your own introduction as to yourself for my audience?
Well, first of all, Johnny, thank you very much for asking me to talk to you. I mean, this is only the second podcast I've done. The first one being with Mike, and I did that really pretty much as a favor because he was. So I'm not a hardened podcaster, so you'll have to forgive my style, or your listeners will. But okay, so a little bit about myself. I currently live in Scotland. I decided to kind of, I suppose, become a little bit of a hermit, without kind of connotations of what that means. I just felt I needed to retreat from the world, really. I'd reached a point where I felt I needed that space from everybody and everything, and just to come back to basics. And it coincided with events happening in the world, and also a kind of message I was given, which I talked about a little bit in Mike's podcast. You say you link into it so people can reference stuff that they want. I'm happy to go into it here, but I've kind of had visions throughout my life which kind of are ahead of time and sort of preempts things happening and kind of give me almost a nods up, if you want, to expect things to change. So it was partly on what on the vision of this of the lockdown starting to happen, and the very great need to feel like I'd reached a point in my life where I needed to retreat. And so I came up to Scotland and started to build my own retreat space, which is something I'm put into practice a lot of things that I've got into over the years, from organics to just building with wood and bushcrafting and very simple things, simple ways of living. And I just felt I could put it all together here. So that's kind of what happened, where I am. Do you want to have a little bit more background? I don't know if that's enough for you.
You know what I'd like to do is actually just go back a little bit further, because you're living a very alternative life now, a life that the vast majority of people, many people would dream of doing it, but few people would have the kind of, I guess, the bravery to actually live it out and to really go down that path of kind of taking, like, going back to nature and, kind of reclaiming your sovereignty and things like this. So I think what would be interesting is to just learn a little bit from, I guess, as far back we need to go to understand how you develop that mindset, because, presumably, unless you've always been this way, presumably at one point you were much more ordinary, and there may have been something there which led you to change that in your life. And I always think that that's a good part of the story to start from, to kind of like learn about how you come to these ideas. Because I know that for me and a lot of other people in this kind of freedom movement, COVID was the big thing, or 9/11 was the big thing. There's normally a big event there. So yeah, I guess, what does your past look like, and how did it lead you towards this path?
Well, when I was young, when I was maybe like 7 or 8, I did have kind of strange, what now I can look back and understand as psychic experiences. At the time, I wouldn't have known what that was about, to be honest. I was born in sort of the late 60s, early 70s, and I don't think anything about kind of what we've got available today. I've never come across like psychism or psychic phenomena and things. But I can identify now as a child. I had like out of body experiences and seeing things in the dark. You'd just be told by your parents that you see a horrible figure coming through the curtains, and it's just a dream. It's just your imagination, and it seems pretty real to you. So it's hard to say when did it start, because there's always been threads there, and I don't think that's unfamiliar to a lot of people, really. So, but it wasn't until I was really 18, and I'd been living down in London, and I got a bit burnt out by the city. I hadn't been there very long, but I just found the place overwhelming. I came from a sort of almost like a Billy Elliot mining town in Derbyshire, and so being in London just felt overwhelming to me, and I just felt the need to come back to the Peak District and be with nature. And I remember one day I just got in my car and I just drove all the way to the hills of the Peak District and didn't stop until I got there and opened the door and I just heard the skylarks again. And I just, that moment I knew like there was something calling me. But it wasn't until really I felt quite lost coming back, and I went to see a psychic medium who um, I'd seen one a few years before, just kind of as you do. My mum was going to see somebody who dragged me along. I was 16, and for a bit of fun, I went to, and she told me things about me that I found quite shocking. I thought, how the heck do they know that? And so, so I think when I came back from London feeling a little bit lost, I decided that, I needed a bit of help and a bit of guidance. And I went to see the psychic medium who said, you told me loads of things, but like also said I was psychic and I could do this, and they would train me. So they did, and they didn't want any money. It wasn't for that. They actually became a little bit like surrogate parents in a way, because they cared for me. I'd go around, we'd have cups of tea, and talk about all sorts of things. So that's really where my kind of starting point into conscious spiritual pathway started, because I then started working with this idea of channeling, whatever they it may be called, or you have a guide, and I just kind of experimented, I suppose, in going along with some of that, which was very interesting. So that was the starting point, really, getting into learning how to communicate, I think, with something that we can't see, taste, touch, but there's some means of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when I was 18. Yeah.
Okay. Did you I'm really interested in the first thing you said about when you were a child and you would kind of like see things, or you seem to have some kind of a touch with the paranormal. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Well, I don't know that there's any real depth of anything. I would just, I suppose I would feel uncomfortable in certain environments. I seem to be very sensitive from it. What now is probably classed as an empath. I would sense things, and um, um, villages or towns you'd go to, or people's houses or something. I could sense things, and so I can't really explain any more than that, to be honest with you, Johnny. That's all. It wasn't like there was anything major happened. I mean, I remember one time I went to my grand's house and the curtains parted and this face poked out from between the curtains, and it was like, that was extremely real and extremely frightening, because I remember my mum having to come all the way over from Chesterfield, which is where I was born, to Sheffield, where my gran was, 12 miles away, in the middle of the night, and bring me back, because I just couldn't settle, no matter what they did, having had this experience. So these were very profoundly, real experiences to me. Now, sometimes people, they say that it's hallucinations or it's dream hallucinations, things, but I don't know. I think that those are just ways of passing off things that we perhaps don't understand within the current paradigm with science. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just things like laying in bed and feeling the bed moving, feeling myself moving, then, like on a wave on an ocean, and suddenly I'm looking at myself in the bed, so. But again, I didn't really think much about them at the time. It's only and then maybe after this conversation, loads of other things might come back to me. But as we speak, those are two which stand out. But again, nothing of any major significance.
Because I mean, I have a theory that some people are able to tune into this and some people just aren't. I mean, I've always felt like I've not been able to. Like, I don't think that I will ever in my life, for example, have a really profound paranormal experience, like seeing a ghost or something. But I've got friends who are like, I've absolutely, I've seen it. Like it was so clear, there was no denying it. Or people who say, I see it regularly or I feel things regularly. And I don't feel like I'm there. I mean, I'm in tune to other things outside of that. I've got a pretty good like bullshit detector. I'm pretty good at knowing like if I'm being lied to, these kind of things. But when it comes to like something within that paranormal realm, psychic abilities, all this kind of stuff, I don't have it at all. I don't have it at all. And I'm interested to know your thoughts on that. Do you think just some people have it and are born with it, and some people aren't?
I think you're probably right. I think there are. I would say that I think probably more people have it or some potentiality of it, but maybe in different ways. And so, um, I don't think it's an extraordinary, unusual phenomena. And it's just, for isolated people. But I would say there are some people who do have very strong abilities in that way for whatever reason. I don't know why some people have those gifts and are able to see things in certain ways. For instance, I don't. Some people say they can see auras. I can't see, and I can't see that at all. I can sense them. I can feel them. It's like I have a different, like a blind person might be able to, train themselves to sense more about their environment. Maybe they could see before and suddenly become blind, and then they have to kind of, learn new skills. I think, we have the capacity to sense things, and maybe it's richer and more colourful in some people than it is in others. Of course, I mean, you can develop that phenomenon. I know there's a big thing at the moment about, children, being able to, blindfold them and train them to recognize numbers and, cards, and so they can develop their capacities. And so maybe some people at birth or in their childhood have experiences which provoke those kind of things happening in them. I really don't know, Johnny, to be honest, but
Yeah. But anyway, it sounds like that was a formative experience for you, having those kind of something outside of the ordinary kind of like occurring. So you mentioned that you went to London and then you left again and you felt more of a calling to, was it just a calling to be more amongst nature, or what was that calling that you were describing?
I think when I was in London, I just felt overwhelmed by everything. But I didn't come from such a busy city, and so it was exciting to be down there. And a bit like the Billy Elliot experience. Coming from a northern mining town, and suddenly you've got everything and so much going off. I saw Telly Savalas and Cher. Whilst I was working in Harvey Nichols at one time. And it's like I'd never experienced things like that. So it was very exciting. But at the same time, I just felt burnt out by it, going into the tube and the smells and stuff. And I really missed. I think that's what I didn't unconsciously realise until, as I say, I got back to the hillsides of Derbyshire that I missed something. But back then, I didn't know what I was on. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know where I was going. I was actually pretty lost. And looking, I'd come out of school, as most people do, and you're thrown into the workforce, but that didn't feel right to me either. I saw, my dad working 7 days a week, sort of 12-hour shifts, and it just felt like there's got to be more to life than this. So when the sort of experience of meeting the people who would train me and give me sort of guidance, I suppose, into what all this psychism was about, it just piqued my interest enormously, and I felt like there was some relevance, and then it started to open up, and it actually became incredibly relevant to me, and that was the entry into what I'm doing now, really. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So let's get into that then, because what you're doing now, there still seems to be quite a jump there between, leaving the city and going and living somewhere more rural, and then what you're doing now, which is totally going on the other end of or the same end of that extreme, but on the extreme end of it, which is living in Scotland and, living. Are you completely off grid?
No, I'm
I
not
don't know
completely off grid. I do have grid electric,
Okay.
but I'm working to get. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, how does that story go there then in terms of just going from leaving London, being more in nature, but then what happened, what life events occurred between then and making this decision to kind of really like move away from mainstream society in a sense?
Okay, so I mean, moving away from mainstream society is only a recent thing. It only happened before COVID, because up
Okay.
until that point, I was living in a town in a terraced house. I've got two kids. I would, lived a normal life. I went to work. I worked in the NHS. I took my kids to school. But ever since this period of 18, where things happened for me and the spiritual kind of side opened up in me, it was like a sort of almost a silent part of my life. I got into yoga in my early 20s and got very, very deeply into to that side of things. And I kind of always wanted to try and find my good, if you know what I mean. And I kind of did in a way through maybe like the teachings of Ramdas were extremely influential on me. And and also the other teachers, Sri Raman Maharishi, I had great respect for. But I wanted the authenticity from yoga, and I just couldn't find it for me at that time. So it was kind of like something that was just personal in my life, because I was working in the NHS, trained to be a nurse for people with learning disabilities, and this is when I came back from London. Obviously, needed something to do to earn money, and so trained and became a nursing assistant. Then I trained as a nurse for people with learning disabilities, and then I was working in social services and the social service sector, again with people with learning disabilities. And then I met my wife, and which was another story, another vision behind that one. And we had kids, and just got a house, and did the normal house, two kids, car, mortgage, all the rest of it. But this was very much a personal side to me, a deeply personal side to me, the spiritual side. It wasn't until I think in 2008, I decided to set up as a yoga teacher, because I'd done my yoga teacher training out in India. I went to Shivananda Ashram, and I wanted to share some of what I felt was really beautiful about what the teachings could offer. And I felt that was right for me to start to do that then. But for very many years, it was just reading books, working on myself, and just a personal aspect of my life was I just looked like everybody else you would not know. But I always had a deep craving to want to go deeper into the teachings.
And for people who maybe don't have too much of an in-depth knowledge about yoga and perhaps just think, oh, well, yoga is like an exercise as opposed to a life philosophy. Can you just break down a little bit like what that philosophy really is, like in a bit more of a in-depth sense?
Yeah, so I suppose yoga's now become very popular. I mean, because it's a health practice that most people can get at their local gym, but that's not the roots or the origin of it. It's actually got deeply spiritual roots to it, and that was the side that I was really more interested in, was the deeply spiritual side, rather than what might be conventionally called hatha yoga, the physical asanas and physical work with the body to improve it. But I was more deeply interested in the meditational side of that, and why are we here? What is this that we're experiencing? And yoga seemed to offer things to me which I found deeply interesting. It just resonated with me. At the time, things like Christianity didn't, which would have been the Western, normal route for most people to enter spirituality might have been by going to their local church. Those things didn't appeal to me, and it wasn't because I was against like Christianity or the idea of God. It just something about it didn't resonate with me. Whereas I felt this deep resonance with the spiritual side of yoga, and so that's what I got into really. And when I started teaching, it was actually more the hatha side of things. But I would leak into the class, the physical class, little bits of spiritual stuff, because not everybody wants this. It's not everybody's bag in life to get it deeply into the spiritual. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you did the yoga teacher training, you learned to instruct, and then did you become a full-time yoga instructor after that, or did you stay working a regular job and doing this as a something on the side?
At first, it was something I did on the side, and then in 2010, I made the final push, and I just decided that was it. I have to do this full time. I can't. I was current, at that time. I was working with drug abuse, and I'd worked in the NHS for about 12 years with crack cocaine, heroin users, and so on. And it was extremely demanding. It's extremely demanding of your mental time, your emotional, your physical. And I just thought I can't dedicate what I really want to dedicate to teaching and sharing people. If I continue to do what I'm doing, I need to, just throw everything into the one thing. And so I did. That's what I did. I set up HeartMind in 2008. I set it up as a not-for-profit spiritual enterprise, as a social enterprise, because I believe that it was important entering into teaching the spiritual things that I wasn't actually profiteering in some way. I mean, obviously, we can get into this, the age of the Kali Yuga, and that we're all selling ourselves out in some ways in this degenerate age. But as much as I had to make money to survive, I wanted it to have an ethic behind what I was doing with it. So I set up HeartMind as a not-for-profit, and since then, I've not looked back. I've just carried on with HeartMind and it led me to where I am today. Here at HeartMind Retreat.
Okay, so the original idea of HeartMind was to teach more about the spiritual teachings of yoga, right? Right. Okay. Let's take that other big jump then to when you kind of became, quote unquote, red pilled in terms of everything that was happening. Like, first of all, was it during COVID or pre-COVID, or what was the moment for you that, really struck a chord in terms of things are not right here?
Well, I have to go back to when I was 18, because when I was 18, some of the experiences I had back then I was told that the world was going to change massively in the future. And it's not quite so clear as like somebody was like standing there telling me like we're having a conversation, but it's the way that I was receiving information was to prepare and to learn things, and I'd get guided. I'd get the feeling to go to the library, and when I go to the library, there was a book on the shelf, a particular book on the shelf, and it was just exactly the book that I needed at that time to get me informed for the next part of what I needed to do. And so ever since 18, I've kind of been learning about organics and learning about the alternative side of life, which we could probably get a little bit more into.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't at that up to speed back then, and so it all started back then really to try and get me to learn about all these things I would now put into practice, which I'm now putting into practice. So I already knew when the vision came to me in 2019. It was actually in March 2019. I saw my road that I was living on being blocked off. There was like barriers put at the bottom of the road. Now I lived on a road where it was a cul-de-sac at the end, so you couldn't get out. And in this vision, the police had cordoned off the bottom of the road and were going up the road and were knocking on all the doors. And because of what I'd already knew was going to be happening, and I knew that actually this stuff was coming in the world, and I'd kind of been sensing the build-up of this since events like 2001, the Twin Towers, little messages being given to me all along of like things are unfolding, and now the storyline, how it's unfolding. If you're reading the book and you get really interested, you know something's going to be ahead, because you're already kind of preempted, if you want, by the earlier chapter. It felt a little bit like that. So in 2019, I already kind of knew something was going to come. I didn't expect what was going to come, but like in March of 2019, I got this vision, as I say, and it provoked me to start to think, this is the time. This is where we're all going to get locked into this tyrannical system. I could feel this, the overburdening nature of being locked in your street and the police, like a metaphorical authority coming banging on your door. It all felt very terrifying, and I knew something about that was going to happen. So that's what I kind of received, if you want, and it prompted me to then start the search to get out of Dodge for want of a better word, and get on the internet and start looking for where the heck I could go, because I really didn't want to be caught up in the town when all this went down. So yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting that you had that vision that things were going to change. Because I guess at that time in 2019, it was probably before COVID was even in the lexicon, right? I mean, that didn't really happen until I think late 2019. So that's that's really interesting. So then you obviously it sounded like you'd had some kind of preparation from this, because you'd already been kind of like going a bit more into the spiritual and feeling things out much more outside of that mainstream in terms of doing things with HeartMind and stuff like that. So perhaps you were kind of like more primed than most, that you were really kind of like going into the world from I guess, sensing out the feeling of the world. Like, I think a lot of people are shut off to that. And I certainly was, even at that time. I mean, like, I kind of came to my point of realization, but for me, it was much more sudden. It was like, after the first week of lockdown, probably coming into the second week of lockdown, 2020, and mine was a very sudden kind of, okay, like I see it now. But for yourself, it was a bit more of a slower process, and you were kind of getting ready and getting prepared to move. So did you ever have any self-doubt about that? Did you ever think, am I just going crazy here? Or were you very, very convinced that, no, I can see the way the world's going to go, and I trust my instinct strongly on this?
No, I knew without any shadow of a doubt. I mean, I think this is the wonderful thing, because things happened to me so early in my life when I was 18, and I didn't take anything for granted. I really I did a lot of investigation and a lot of questioning about what was happening to me back then, almost like testing if the divine was trying to get me to a particular place. I was not I was a bit stupid. I'll say that they did really well. They knocked some sense into me, but I also questioned. I didn't just fall into this and so the great thing is I had lots of time from 18 to when the vision came, or when COVID started, where I'd already had so much affirmation throughout my life, through so many things happening to me, so many experiences, synchronicities, meeting people, that I was within no doubt now that what I was receiving and how I was receiving things was coming from a place that I felt really comfortable with in my heart, and had got my back, was all about love and honoring and all the principles that I really held deeply valuable. So no, I didn't have any doubts at all when it came. Probably what I doubted more was myself, to be honest, and could I do it? Could I make this leap from being in a comfortable terraced house, central heating, electric, supermarket down the road, everything, every convenience that you want on your doorstep? Could I do it and make this break to what was essentially an old wooden shed that had gone derelict in the hills of Scotland, but I just knew I had to. I suppose somebody once said to me, it's really handy to have a delusional "I can do" attitude, because if you thought you can't, if you really looked at the reality of what the circumstances are, and you didn't, you probably wouldn't do it. I just kind of somehow knew I had to do it, and when I got here, it wasn't without its challenges, but actually you can do a lot more than you think. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, let's go into that process then. So you made this decision that it was time to leave and that it was time to, go to Scotland. First of all, why Scotland? Why did you choose Scotland of all places?
So I've always had a resonance with Scotland. I really love the wilderness here, and there's just, I don't know, something about the landscape in the way that makes me feel it has a deep. It just, yeah, it's just different to all the places I've been to. It almost has an ancient echo to it that just makes me feel very much at home. And I really didn't want to move out of the UK because, like, I got my parents and my children and connections with friends, and I don't speak any other language than English. So it might have been a bit of a difficult for me move some other country somewhere else. So I just felt for me it was the right place to look in Scotland. Also, for years I've been looking in England for something like what I've got now, but you just cannot get it. Getting planning permission to do this kind of thing was in England. It's almost, yeah, forget it. It's almost impossible to get the planners to even think outside the box and allow you permission to do these things. I think it's changing, and there are a lot more places in England itself that are happening now. I did at one time spend a lot of time sort of traveling the UK, looking at alternative communities and kind of like co-housing setups and housing co-ops and people who are trying to live off grid. Um, and I didn't want to join in with that. In a way, I felt I needed to be kind of either part of an existing eco village kind of thing, or I would just have to create my own, or just have to do my own thing. And Scotland provided not only the atmosphere, but the wilderness and the connection to nature, and land was pretty affordable. So also the reason, like, I had a very small budget, and it would not have probably bought me many places really, but it was enough for me to just buy this old derelict cabin and be able to move into it. So there were so many factors really that came into why Scotland. And when I got here, I just knew the moment I walked into the cabin. It's like people say that, you go to see a house and should we buy this house? And well, no, it doesn't feel, and then you just know when something feels right for you. And so this was the place that felt absolutely right. I had a bucket list of places up the west coast of Scotland to go and have a look at. This was the first one I came to, and I didn't leave. I didn't didn't even go. I knew I didn't need to carry on searching any further. I'd found my place, So
Wow,
yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah, because I was actually going to ask, was there any moment where you kind of got in there and, closed the deal, bought the place, shut the door, and kind of thought, oh my God, what am I doing type thing? But it sounds like you didn't have that experience. It was the opposite. If anything, you were just absolutely ready for it.
Well, it was mixed really, because, like, yes, on the one hand, yes, I was absolutely ready for it, and I knew it was the right place. But then your own sort of mind plays tricks with you, and you start to say, "Oh God, goodness, what have I done? What have I taken on? Can I do this? There's such a lot to do." I mean, it was in a pretty sorry state. It's not like you see it today. Today, it needed an awful lot of work to even still got work to do now, And this is for coming on 5 years that I've been here, but. I knew a deep level I'd been guided here, and this was for a reason. It was for my safety, and it was not only just for my safety. It was like a sanctuary I was coming to, that for me to do the deeper work that I wanted to do spiritually in myself. And that's why I say the hermit side of things, because it's, whether you go off into the forest like the Buddha did, or you see monks going off into temples in different parts of Thailand and stuff. They all choose to get away from the trappings of society, because you can't do that kind of. I don't think you can really do that deep kind of spiritual work to make the transition from what we're being programmed as and what we're being born into, to really get to the depth of what we might consider to be reality without extricating yourself from it. So yeah, I've just been very fortunate, I suppose, in a way that I've been blessed to be guided, and somebody's knocked on the door and told me to move at times when I need to, and that's why I'm here doing what I'm doing now. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were listening out for those signs as well and being attuned to it. Because I think that probably happens for everyone, that you are being kind of gently guided, and it's
Yes.
very, very hard to tune into it and kind of recognize it. And like you said, I think that is especially hard for people who are very wired in. And I think this is the position that I feel I'm in, is that I am very connected. Like I've never lived too off grid or anything like that, or too far away from like a major town or city, for example. And there is always, you're always that close to it that you're never so far removed from it that you're able to kind of really go into your own space. Like there's always kind of a reason or a temptation to just kind of like tune back in and to kind of wire in, even if it's just like, oh, let's just see what's going on. So yeah, I can definitely see why a lot of spiritual people, like in the past and presently, choose to do that, choose to go out somewhere and say, no, I'm going to be in the quiet, because that's where you're most capable, I guess, to receive those messages and to act on them. So with you kind of going out there, what was aside from obviously getting away from the kind of mainstream society to some degree, is it also that there is a larger vision here for what you want to build? Do you hope that that people will kind of join you on this mission, or kind of also go and live in similar areas, or is it just a place for you to be in your own space? Like, what's the overall kind of goals for I guess HeartMind, but specifically like location based?
Well, HeartMind doesn't exist as it was a charity and a charitable enterprise, as I say, that are set up, but I don't run it as a charitable enterprise anymore. It does I wound the opposite as that.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, so HeartMind is really just what I call this place, and it's more about,
Right.
Uh, a logo, a moniker, or whatever you want to call it, for the activities of what I do. I use the term HeartMind because to me, it's about bringing together the truths that you may find in all different spiritual traditions and bringing them together with perhaps even some of the science of today around the term heart mind. And what I'm actually talking about is this core principle of heart and mind, and how it works in relationship to what we're experiencing. Because I think we can make it very complex. I'm a Buddhist. I follow the Buddha Dharma to some degree. I also follow the yogic Dharma, and I also follow a bit of Sufism. I follow a bit of Taoism. It's like it's very hard for me to say that any one thing is the right thing. And so, for me, heart mind embodies like what I think is a fundamental spiritual truth that underpins or runs through all these different traditions, whatever they go through. So that was why I set it up as a charitable thing. But today, it's really just like the name for my little retreat, which is my home. I share it with my friends. I don't open it to the public. It's not for people can book in like on an Airbnb. It's like if you want to, get to know them. It's like getting to know you. Do you know what I mean? We'll probably might become friends, and you might come and visit one day. But it'll be through that kind of way of doing things, where I'm, want to spend time, and you want to spend time here and get to know each other better, and just share the space. So that's kind of what I'm doing with it. It's not to become an eco community or a bigger community of people. It's just a space where people I make connections with who feel they want a bit of space. They're welcome to come and visit and stay and see what I'm doing real time and learn things. But apart from that, what I try and do is I try and share what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is nothing really spectacular, to be honest. Over the years, I've been really just look at, many wonderful projects, through the Eco Village network, and you see people like Charles Dowding and what he's doing. And so there's far more impressive people doing a lot more of their skills. But I think our responsibility is, when we come to awaken this, we have to share what we are and what we can do with others, because it does help inspire other people. And when I came here, I wanted to keep a lot of the connections with the friends that I'd developed through the friendships I developed through HeartMind when I was running it, and bring them along on the journey. And so I started making little videos really because it was just so much easier to than sitting and typing a newsletter when you're trying to repair an old cabin and stuff, to just do a quick video and send it to your friends, and this is what you've done. And they, I was just amazed how many people got back to me and said, "Oh, it's really inspired. I was really touched about it. It's great to see what you're doing," and how it was to see somebody make a break, if you want, to get out and follow their dreams is inspiring to anybody. So I kind of try and do it on that basis. Really, what I'm doing here is just share. Very simply, it's not. There's many other things, many other projects which could be more inspiring, but I feel because I'm trying to get to the nub of what the heart mind bit is about it, and the reason why I came to live the way that I do. That's the core message that I'm trying to communicate, I suppose, with the people who want to listen, like yourself. So
Yeah, so there's a few strings that I'd like to pull on there, but one of them is just what you just said there, and you said that trying to understand what you are being called to. What do you feel like it is that you are being called to? Is it to inspire? Is it to, and if it is to inspire, what is it you're hoping to inspire in people?
I think it's to, for some reason, I'm able to see a little bit ahead of time. I've been blessed with being able to see that this was coming, and to have a sense of I know what the next thing is. So we are heading into darker days. I mean that's evident, and I suppose it's to help people to navigate through all of this to get to a point where some of what I've been blessed in my own life to perhaps we can get into this. I'm very familiar now and very comfortable with the term God, although I don't associate it with just a Christian perspective. I use that because it's a Western term, which it would equally be as appropriate for me to use Brahman, or sort of the Tao, But these terms might not resonate with the everyday person or your listeners. So I feel that God is the central bit really to help us navigate what is happening, coming to the realization of why we're here, what created us, what is this experience, and why is all this happening, and how can we navigate and get through this to a better place? Because I truly believe that we're actually not meant to be living the way that we have been living. I've spent the vast part of my life, I'm 55, going on 56, trying to get out of the system to get to a little bit more free. And I think I have a few insights that might help a few other people. And so if I can share those and those do help people, that's wonderful. That's the kind of service I think I'm being asked to do is speak as honestly as I possibly can do about what's happened to me in my life and what I'm doing here. And it feels uncomfortable on some level, I'll be honest with you, Johnny, because it's like you're exposing yourself and your soul to the entire world. Doing a podcast, you have no idea who's listening. But I just feel that's what I have to do. I have to share some of what's happened to me, and maybe it might touch the odd person. And if it does, and it helps them, then I think that's what it's about. We're all here to help each other, as the Buddha said. To cross over the river, cross to the other side. We don't have to keep living in the way that we've lived. It's insane. The way we are living on this planet is absolute insanity, and there has to be a saner, better way for us to live. And so I'm just working as best I can. I've got nothing really, really special to offer. As I say, there's loads of people doing their bit. I'm just working more where I can to do my bit to contribute to this saner world. Yeah, that's about all I can say to you, Sean.
Okay. No, I mean, I don't think there's any I mean, it's obviously great that you're humble about it, but I actually don't think that it's there's I think especially amongst British people, we have this tendency, if we feel like we have something to give to the world, we almost feel like we have to maybe apologize for it a bit, or kind of feel like, oh, I can't be too direct about this. I can't be like, look, I've got all this amazing stuff to share and I really want to share my experience. You have to kind of like tone it down a bit. Whereas perhaps in like, America or something where they have a bit more of a culture of just being like, no, go big, or, that kind of thing of, really celebrating like success and making it in life, etc. But no, I think that like, this is exactly what people need to be doing, especially now because it's so clear that people have lost their way. Like we've lost our way individually, collectively, in terms of like our social structures, in terms of like, governments and everything. It's so clear that we've gone wrong, and people need like answers, and people need guidance. And I think that everyone is having to ask those questions because, I think that one of the few good things about COVID. Well, I shouldn't say few because I actually think that COVID had to happen, and we can get into all that kind of stuff. But I think that it was a watershed moment that had to happen because people needed the kind of water splashed over their face as to how far we've drifted from real values, real things, etc. So that's another area to go into separately. But I do think that one of the great things about it is that people are having to reassess, what do I believe? Like, who are the people that I follow? Where do I seek wisdom? Where do I find guidance, etc.? Because before that, it was just, well, the government, the government just gives out this blueprint. Okay, everyone should do this. Or maybe it's, people in academia or something, or, the academia system, go and do this, go and study this thing, and then you can get this job. And if you get this job, that'll all be great. And, you're being kind of just guided by these things, but not really like looking too much inward. And I think that what happened during COVID is that we looked at all of these people who we were supposed to respect. I mean, you're not supposed to respect anyone more than, the government officials, the government experts, or perhaps outside of that, you could say, oh, well, no, the doctors or the lawyers. And what were the lawyers doing? They weren't, I didn't see them saying anything about the fact that people were being, arrested for not wearing a mask, or for putting something on social media about, going to a protest or whatever. The doctors were out there, jabbing everyone for £6.50 a pop or whatever they were doing. The politicians were, revoking everyone's rights and, pretending as if Nuremberg had never happened and we didn't have all of these codes to live by. So literally all of these institutions that we were supposed to believe in completely not only failed us, but did the opposite of what they were meant to do. It was like the exact worst places to look are the places that we've been told for the previous, 50, 60, 70 years. Oh, these institutions are great, and these are the places you should seek wisdom. So now I think people have come away and gone, okay, like, where do I seek wisdom now? Who do I follow? Who do I look to? And people are finding it like in interesting places. And I think that there is almost a responsibility actually now for people who have kind of seen it, who have seen through that stuff, to say, like, I'm willing to impart knowledge. I'm willing to share it, like, because there's a reason that you were able to spot it. Like, for those people who weren't able to spot it and weren't able to recognize you were being conned, well, it's time for those people to, sit down and listen. This is what really kind of aggravates me so much about some of these people who didn't say anything at the time, like these big figures who said nothing during COVID, like, you just went along with it all. And then 2 years later, suddenly they want to be, the person standing at the front telling everyone, oh yeah, that was all nonsense and you should follow me and this is all bad ideas. And it's like, sorry, like, where were you 2 years ago when this was really happening? Like, you don't get to keep that spot anymore. Like, all seats in terms of, who was going to impart knowledge and wisdom in society, in my view, they all became vacated during COVID. And the only people who really should have been nominated to those roles, like, you are worthy of being someone who can kind of guide others, is, did you see the scam? Like, I think it's such an important point. And I know that, like, I always feel like I'm at risk on this podcast of harping on about the COVID thing, but I do think that it was so significant in what it represented. I'm not talking specifically about the events that occurred with COVID. They're their own conversation. But in terms of what it represented, it was like, you can either see it or you can't. It's like, do you have the vision for this? It was a massive test. So I've kind of rambled a bit on this point and got away from what I was trying to get at. But like I think that we are going through a time now where everyone's having to reassess that and say, where do I find that wisdom? Where do I seek it? So I just think it's great that someone like yourself, that you feel like you have something to offer, you are actually stepping up to that plate and saying, no, I feel like I have something to offer and I'm not going to shy away from that responsibility. I'm going to go into it because that's what we need. And I think that if you're called to it, you're called to it for a reason.
Well, thank you. I mean, that actually makes say I'm quite British and quite shy about speaking out and saying things. Also, because people are so willing to criticize and attack you. I mean, and particularly if you start talking about spiritual matters, there's all kinds of people willing to criticize what you say. And so I value so much what I have found it for myself. I don't want to open it up to to all the sundry to be to be the punch bag in the room kind of thing. But I also have got the confidence now that actually I know, not because because I'm clever or wish to be the guru, the new guru in the room, because all the old ones have left the seats, as you say. No. I think all those days are gone. I think what you were so right, actually, that COVID, a bit like in the same way that 9/11 had a massive impact in the world and changed the tone, a quality of the energy in the psychic vibration of the entire world for people. Let's not forget what happened with COVID. I mean, the entire world shut down. I mean, like even during the Second World War, it was not that level of orchestration. Now we know it was orchestration. So the scale of the game has now been revealed. That was what happened with it. And most people's material paradigm, the belief in the material structures, the belief in, there's this person, very educated, academic, and has, their superiority. We give them the superiority because they've reached all that. All that has fallen away. Mm-hmm. It's all been exposed. And so, if anything of what this is about is actually now people recognizing deeper down that what I refer to in this way, there's two ways. From yoga, there's a path of dharma, which is the path of goodness and righteousness and love and peace and doing the right things. And there's the path of adharma, which is kind of like doing all the wrong things, and all the wrong things have an impact upon us. And what has collectively happened over generations and generations of adharma, people living in ignorance, living in delusion, living in material greed, part of what we might consider to be the age of the Kali Yuga. That's something we could talk about. Sorry for your listeners. I try to steer away from these terms and terminologies and try to keep it just simple, plain English. But this age of darkness that we're in is recognized in Indian culture, and it's called the age of the Kali Yuga. And so kind of what's happened if you again, karma comes into this. So I believe that we all have our individual karma. I say a horrible word to you, you'll never speak to me and speak to you nicely. We'll be friends for life. So there's a karma in every action, and things that we do in the world has an implication and an effect, and works on an individual level, but also on a collective level. So we can now see I feel that all the generational karma of all this adharma over generations and generations and generations has now led up to this point where we've had such a monumental gaslighting of such an incredible level that it's exposed itself to anybody who's got a good heart. Anybody who we're all a bit lost. We're all a bit fractured, a little bit broken. None of us are perfect. But like anybody deep down who's got a conscience and a good heart woke up the moment that happened. So this is where we're at. It was a horrible experience, but it's like nectar from the gods if you can use it. That's the thing. It was so painful that it touched everybody's hearts. It broke people's hearts in many different ways, and that breaking just takes you deeper And if anything, that's the beautiful thing that's to come out of that, and where we can go from this is like you say, nobody believes in the material paradigm anymore. Everybody knows there's now a spiritual dimension to this, where liars and cheats and government officials and intelligence services and power brokers and gangster banksters, all the lot is just, it's there, evident to see if you can see it. And once you can see it, your way out is easy. Well, easier, because you're not going to fall into the repetitive trap of being dragged back in. And of course, they want to drag you back in. And this is what all the gaslighting, control of the media, control of the narratives. Like I said with Mike, we have to be so careful now about the narratives. And so you're right. When we listen to these narratives that these people we've trusted tell us, it's like some of it doesn't make sense at all. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with you, Johnny. You're spot on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things that I want to comment on there. Like one of them is just that quite often in life there is these big traumas that happen, and they're almost kind of like it's almost kind of like an event that needs to happen to kind of like reset you. You need some kind of a shock in your life to spiritually reset you. And these things happen, it's not just that it happens personally or, collectively in terms of with something like COVID, where we needed this realignment event, something to really shake up the snow globe, so to speak, so everything can kind of resettle. But, it happens in all kinds of things. It's almost like a force of nature in some way. Like, I mean, it literally happens in nature. You think about something like a storm is like the resetting of the atmospheric pressure. You have this huge storm, and then afterwards things can settle, and then you can kind of have this peace again. And this, I guess this thing, I don't know what to really call it, this kind of like energy seems to kind of like manifest in lots of different ways, individual, collective, nature, all of these other things. And then, the other thing that I wanted to say about that is, and I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this too, is perhaps what's happened with COVID is that they didn't realize how far they were going to push it. The straw kind of broke the camel's back. And now that they know, we've lost the room. Like the room is, we're not going to regain the room here. Like we're not going to get everyone back into this. Too many people now can see it for what it is, can see us for what we are. And that perhaps they've moved into another phase where they're just like, let's just go for all out war now. Let's just try to create as much division between people as possible. Let's create as much carnage as possible, because it's almost like they don't mind having absolute obedience and they don't mind having absolute carnage and violence and destruction. What they don't want is that thing where people come together and kind of recognize, no, I know a new way of living here, and I'm going to kind of calmly move into this alternative system and exist outside of this paradigm. That's where they don't want you. But I suspect that they've given up now on trying to make people obedient, which is why they're so blazingly, just, for example, censoring social media and just gaslighting on TV. Everything that happened recently with these, this kind of, I don't even know how you call it, but this latest psyop, so to speak, that seems to be pitting, people who are non-British against British and different religions against each other. And they're just fanning the flames now, I mean, I think that there's legitimate grievances on all sides. I'm not saying that the people who are totally against, immigration stuff, they don't have like some valid points, but rather than saying, okay, look, we hear your points and we understand it, and, maybe we can meet in the middle somewhere here about how we handle the situation. It's like, everything that the government's saying is just deliberately gaslighting this group of people, trying to make them as inflamed as possible. So it seems to me that the strategy has changed now. And the same's happening in America with, Kamala Harris, and dropping Biden and putting Kamala Harris, and then just the number of like obvious psyops. I mean, they're not really even pretending anymore. Now it's just like, let's just create as much division between people as possible and then see where that goes, because they've just switched gears. Like, obedience isn't working. We'll just go for destruction now. So interested to get your thoughts based on both of those things.
Okay, so I think that there's two ways to look at this. There's the material level and there's the spiritual level. What I mean by the spiritual level is, what do I mean by the material level? Everything that we may have lived for in the past, of seeing politics and economics and human control and humans in control and I don't think they're just working this out on the back of the fag packet as things go along. They've spent decades planning this in extreme detail, and they're so arrogant that they have the power and the money to feel that they can actually do it and pull it off, and they have the right to do it and to pull it off, and it's their mission to do it, because so when perhaps something doesn't quite go the way, yes, they move to like maybe, okay, shift that a little bit to plan B. Well, they've already kind of like mapped all this out. They have a goal in mind of where they wish to take us to, and it's very evident because they're not making it like you just have to sit and like us and kind of like in the back of a pub have a conversation and come up with some theories. They actually put the documents out there for us to actually discuss. So the gaslighting is like you can't talk about these documents or anything that they it's almost like what they call the revelation of the method. It's almost like they have to tell you what they're doing, and so you can get pulled down military documents by our own government about transhumanism and the fourth industrial revolution and brain chipping us and the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Things. I mean, look, they're building a panopticon, which is almost like something out of the Matrix. I mean, the whole way that they wish to do it on a material level, this is what I said to Mike. I have no idea how, even if 1 million people got together, how you would stop this Leviathan that they've got. Well, this is the thing that they didn't perhaps take into account because of their arrogance, because what is happening is so dystopian and so anti-God, which is, when I say God, what I mean is the intrinsic creative force behind this. Behind this creation that we're having this moment, this experience of you there, your body, our speech, the rooms that we're in, the world that we're in. This whole thing, I don't believe, is malevolent at its core. I think it's a beautiful, amazing expression. And from what I feel about it, it was God's expression for creation was to experience some joy in this. There's inbuilt suffering, which we can perhaps get into. The Buddha talked very clear about in his First Noble Truth. And I draw upon that kind of teaching to help me understand a lot of things. But it was intrinsically a good force behind things. So they are in, whatever this is, it's in opposition to the very foundational energy that's trying to maintain this reality that we're in. And that's where it will fail, because it's so in disaccord with what fundamentally is the right thing. This is where so it's just fundamentally in disaccord. But I don't think they are naive. I don't think they're working out as they go along. They may change slightly things, but they've got a trajectory where they want to take us to, and it's not one that I feel incredibly comfortable about. And it's also one which propelled me to want to, as well as like for my own personal reasons, to retreat and be in sanctuary, to kind of like grow spiritually. It was to get out of what they're trying to construct. And I think many people are now seeing that and want to, if they've not already started, they want to be in a different place to where they don't want to get caught up in what they're trying to create. None of us do. And I think that's what's become apparent is like they are hell bent, no matter what they seem to do, in just continuing down this path. It's like you make a social faux pas in a group of people. At what point do you go, I tell you what, I'll get my coat. I'll just leave it to you. I fucked up big style. I'm going home. All right. They're just not stopping. It's like the bad drunk at the party who's just not getting the message, and he's just rambling around, destroying the place, and just like crazy. So, but everybody else is seeing what's going off. We don't want this. We don't want this in any way, shape, or form. But they are so psychopathic that they don't care. They've lost touch, and this is what, if anything, I feel so strongly about, is they've lost this dystopian nightmare has so lost touch with the intrinsic nature of what's good in our hearts for human beings that's why it will fail, because we as human beings cannot live in what they have planned. It just will never ever work. And that's what I believe why it's ultimately destined to collapse. I don't think without, sadly, some unfortunate events more happening in the world, because as you said, the division, they continue to push this until we all realize and just stop going along with it and stop buying into their narratives. People will play them out. This is the karma of the narratives playing out.
Yeah. There's a really, really great quote. It's one of my favorite ones. I always butcher quotes. I don't think I've ever got a quote correct on this podcast, so I'm going to try for the first time now. An evil man will burn his nation to the ground in order to rule over the ashes. I think it was from The Art of War. I think it was The Art of War. But anyway, I really love that quote, and I think again, it's another thing that applies in many, many different areas. This can apply in people's lives. It can apply on governmental levels and all kind of things. And I think that these people who run the show, these kind of psychopathic people, sociopathic, whatever they are, there's something not right within them. There's something wrong. There's something corrupted. I don't like to ever rule people out entirely and just say there's no redemption for you. Like, I hope everyone is redeemable. I don't know that for a fact. I hope everyone is. But there is something fundamentally broken in these people. I mean, you just need to look at them. You just look at Tony Blair, for example, and tell me he's not an evil person. Like, anyone who has any kind of a sense of able to recognize good from evil, you can look at a man like Tony Blair and be like, I don't know if you've always been evil, but I can sense evil in you. Like, it's like, I don't even need to meet you to know you're evil. Same with like, Jacinda Ardern was another one during this whole thing. Like, this woman went fully evil, Justin Trudeau, fully evil person. Like, there's people all across the board like this, but the flip side of that, and I agree completely with what you said, is that is disharmonious to the trajectory of the world. And I think this is why these people try to shut down spirituality so much, whether that is, they hate Christianity. And, I'm similar to you. I'm not like I've kind of grown up in somewhat Christian traditions, but like, I'm not really into, I don't go to church and all this kind of thing, but I can at least recognize the value in believing, rightfully, in my view, that we live in a universe created by some kind of source energy, call it God or call it what you want, which has I don't want to necessarily call it like a purpose, but its essence is good. Its essence is good, not evil. You try to create evil within something which the essence of its very nature, is good. And it will be like a fire that can maybe exist for a certain amount of time, but is destined to be extinguished because, it's like hurtling towards a river, perhaps, whatever. Like, that is kind of how I see it. And I think this is where spirituality comes into all this kind of stuff, because it's just like, you can either just get really buried into it and live in that fear. Even if you're awake to it, you can be awake to it and say, yes, they're evil and all this kind of stuff, but, oh, the world is also evil, and therefore I'm just going to kind of like hide away and be afraid. Or you can go, no, this is an expression. This evil is a temporary expression. It's something that needs to be experienced and realized, but there is a trajectory of where this thing is going, where this life force, this universe is heading, and it's heading towards something good. And that these are just kind of hurdles for us to overcome, on an individual level, on a collective level. This one happens to be collective, but it happens in your life as well. That's why, just sometimes like really, really bad things will happen. You'll get hit by a bus and you won't be able to walk again. And, that sucks. However, can you grow from it? Can you understand it? Can you come deeper into your own knowledge about yourself, into your own knowledge about the universe? I think that's always the angle that we should be like trying to take, is to say, okay, this bad thing has happened. Is it purely bad? Well, no. In a universe which is good, this thing can never be just pure bad. There always has to be some reason for it, or something that we can learn, and something we can evolve into a better version of ourselves through it. And that's what I really like about the kind of stuff that you're talking about. I don't know too much about like yogic tradition stuff. I definitely want to learn and read more about it. But just from having a conversation with you now, I feel like that's kind of what it's getting at, and that's kind of like one of the core aspects of it. And I think it's really important for us to have. So I think that the spiritual side of this is really important. And what I do unfortunately see a lot, especially like on social media, on like Twitter and stuff like this, there's a lot of people who just, they haven't got that spiritual aspect to it. They're not looking through a spiritual lens at all of this. Everything is just like, how do we beat them? How do we beat the libs? How do we do this? How do we get Trump in power? Like, how do we beat these forces through some kind of like, some kind of like a combative mindset, rather than saying, no, how do we actually transcend all of this through a spiritual mindset? And I sense that that's maybe kind of like what you're trying to do, and it's certainly what I'm having more and more conversations about this on this podcast. I mean, really, I have from the beginning, but especially recently, I'm really going into that a lot more, because I think that that is the biggest component to this.
Okay, so something I'd really like to get into is perhaps the nature of consciousness, and because I think it's really relevant now. Not because I want people to become yogic or Buddhist or anything else, but just the nature of consciousness itself. So the ancient yogis, and you have to look back at ancient culture. I don't know if you've done any investigation on this yourself, but
No, not much.
we like to think that we are the pinnacle of evolution in terms of technology and progression, and we've come from like the caves and caveman, and look where we are today. It's such a fallacious and misguided view, because we've actually been robbed of our history, and now again things are coming out. It's like there's caves in India where they've built into the rock. So like a hillside made out of rock, and they built into the rock of the hillside, carved it out like temples. Now, these carvings are so precise in the way that they're carved, and the polish of the inside of the wall so precise that we can't even do that today. I mean, it's beyond. It's like if you imagine there was an alien force that came with some laser cutter and cut the thing out. Like so how? And they still exist for us to see, but we're gaslighted, told this and that. Look, there's been more intelligent civilizations. The pyramids, people, we can't build something, we can't cut stone like some of this stuff. So there are things that exist of ancient cultures that we still have evidence for. So I respect when I go back into their teachings where they've told us about this age and what the nature of consciousness is and what happens and so on and so forth. This is the way I see it, is that we have collectively, over generations and generations and generations, added to the karmic pot of the narrative and the things that need to be worked out. And we've reached a point. It's called the age of the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, where we've gone from like this golden age, the Satya age, the age of righteous practice, living in right livelihood and just in peace and everything else. And we've fallen, almost like the fall from grace over a period of time, into this dark age, the degenerate age, where now it talks about even yogis will become merchants. So yeah, I have to go out and I have to become a merchant because it's the degenerate age. I have to charge for a yoga class. Do you want to pay for my electric bill? Because they're not going to just take a little bit of paper from me like I owe you, So this is the degeneration of spirituality in this age. We are all going to have to cross through the eye of the needle here, and to get through to the other side, it means time to go now within, to go within ourselves. This will be so beautiful because it will be so simple. People will discover the beauty of their own heart and the beauty of what love reveals in their eyes and what they see of this world. And in the meantime, you will see dystopia. Because this is the stuff that's the karma dying out in the world, but it can't just stop like that. It's got to burn itself out, a bit like the phoenix, and it rising out of the ashes. If we are going to move into, and I hate to use the term a new age, because that is also there's an element of psyop that was involved around that whole kind of marketing of the new age, which we could get into perhaps on another podcast or something. But like we are definitely moving towards a more heartfelt living existence, and that's what interests me, and that's why I try not to stick with one particular path, and so I can talk a little bit from like what inspires me from Christianity in this, because there are things where somebody is talking from their heart and where people are presenting wisdom and truth, and something resonates in you if you've got a good heart, and I've got to do that, and it just sparks in your brain, and then your path is forward. That's what's happening. We are all connecting up. We're all seeing the way forward. We're all realizing the things we need to do. Like, we've got to change our agriculture. We've got to change our economics. We've got to change everything about what we have done on this planet if we are going to create a better future. It might not be a utopia, because also there are cycles of the way this all works, and we're born. Buddha says, the moment we're born into the world, there's pain. There's a potential for suffering. Childbirth itself can be a painful process. We're not going to have an existence which is pain-free or without challenge or without some kind of level of discomfort about it. Something that will be unsatisfactory, and it will never be absolutely perfect. But we can head towards our part in the creation of creating that on this planet, and that's what I believe we are going through right now, is this transitional phase where the old is dying, they're hanging on, they've got all the power, but you can't fight this. You can't fight this in any other way than to actually go within and absolutely free yourself from within. Won't you free yourself from within? Does it matter when you're free from within, in your heart and in your mind, and like, you can no longer be gaslighted. Like, well, you can't do much physically. You can enact out in your world, do beautiful physical actions, and that's all we're being asked to do. Don't look outside for this political organization or this person. No. We have to go within. We have to be the agents of change within ourselves. If Christ is the second coming, it'll be through recognizing the love in our own hearts. That's what God or Christ would ever want, or what Buddha would want, or any sane, wise person would want. Evil, there's two different schools of thought around evil. That it physically exists out there, either in some other dimension or around us, or actually it's born of something within ourselves. These are the two spiritual schools, if you want. So Abrahamic religions believe there's the Satan form in I think it's called Iblis, isn't it, in Islam? So, but really, are they just projections? Is Tony Blair just a collective projection of the karma that we have built up inside ourselves? And so now we've created him. We've created him. The way to resolve it is not to hate the guy, because then what have you done? You've created hate in your own heart. I'm not going to say that I'm going to condone anything he does or anything.
Invite him round for tea.
Yeah, he'll be the drunk at the table. Get your coat, Tony. Go on. But what I'm saying is, like, the game doesn't stop until we change it within ourselves. The Buddha said, like, being angry is like carrying a hot stone in your hand. The only person that's getting burnt is you. And if you carry anger in your heart, it's robbing you of your intrinsic right to connect with the divine in the way that we were meant to connect. So don't hate, no matter what comes. Keep your peace, keep your love in your heart, because that is untouchable. That's the one thing that they really don't like, and they can't do anything about. So they try to gaslight us in every way possible, with great fear, division, and everything else. About love is the only. Like something off the Beatles now. We should make a record about it. Love is truly the only answer to this solution, and we have to feel it in ourselves and have the courage to recognize when we're not being loving, and it's embarrassing. I look at myself, I have plenty of time here stuck on my own. I don't see people for weeks. I mean, I don't have people walk up my, around it. I'm completely cut off unless I engage with the world. So sometimes I'm left I'm embarrassed sometimes to see myself, what I've been. what I've done. Sometimes even the ideas that pop into my head from, and I can see the legacy. I can see how so much of this was like what I thought the world was, and how it's conditioned me in a certain way. And so we have to have the courage to really go introspective, to look at ourselves deeply, and only when we free ourselves to that degree do we extricate ourselves from the game out here, and that's it. When everybody does that and unplugs, if you want, from the matrix by going within, freeing themselves within. You're doing the Staying Free podcast. What were we ever free in the first place to stay free? And if we were, what is that freedom?
Yeah.
Is it because we need freeing the world, or or do you value more your internal freedom?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because when I first started the podcast, most of the conversations were about staying free in spite of all of the craziness that was going on, the lockdowns and the vaccine passports and all this kind of stuff. It was kind of that was the main mentality of it. But I think over time, I've actually recognized much more that it's a mindset thing. Like that, like the mindset kind of comes almost before anything. And you're right, you're always responding otherwise. Like if you're not trying to find some kind of a spiritual freedom within yourself, like some kind of a connection, something outside of all of this, you're always just going to respond to whatever it is. And I still think that that is the most common response right now. I still think that most people, their response is just, I see so many people they sharing like clips that trigger them all the time on Twitter. Oh, look at what Keir Starmer said about this. Oh, look at what Bill Gates said about this, and just kind of like getting all like enraged about it rather than just saying like, no, just like, tune out of that. You're perpetuating the matrix by even sharing it and by just getting triggered about it. That's what they're going to do. They want you to be angry. People think that they aren't aware. It's so obvious they want you to feel a certain way, right? Like I think this is about politics all the time when people are like, oh, isn't it amazing? Like with all for like one example, like with Joe Biden, like losing his mind and everything like this, and everyone's like, oh, they're trying to pass him off as that he's not lost his mind, and they're cutting away at the wrong time. But then this other clip is leaked by another news organization, and look, he's shaking hands with a non-existent person. It's like, do you really think that they couldn't just swap him out? If they wanted to swap him out, they would have swapped him out long ago. There's a reason they want you to be seeing that, because they want you to be angry and they want you to be patriotic and say, no, we can't have Joe Biden. He's ruining America. We need the next person. Like we need the Trump or whatever it is. They want you to be in this paradigm of like being angry and trying to kind of like fight all the time. Like, whereas the actual response is just to say, isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that they want us to see this person's, cognitive? I mean, it's sad in a way, but it's funny that they think that we're going to believe this, that they think that this is all, that we're going to believe it's all an accident. Of course it's not. With this Olympic stuff, like they're not trying to, people are saying like, oh, they're hiding these messages, they're hiding the way that it was set up, and it looks like the what was it, the Last Supper scene, and there's the horse with like that's being ridden by death or whatever, the white horse, and this is in the Bible, and they're putting these subliminal messages. Well, they're not subliminal. They want you out there seeing it. They want to offend you. They want to offend the religious people. They want you to be triggered. They want you to be afraid. Like this is exactly what they want. So yes, we can recognize it, but let's recognize it and either laugh about it or just say, okay, I'm recognizing it. I'm acknowledging that it's there and that this is the state they want me to be in. I'm not going to bite that. I'm not going to take the bait. I'm just going to kind of like move on with the things that I care about, having loving relationships with the people around me, seeing to my own needs when it comes to self-sovereignty and freedom, and, having a spiritual connection. Like if that's a response we have, no matter what they give us, like then we can finally start moving into the new paradigm. But there's still this very, very strong campaign, I think, that they, like I said before, they've lost the obedience. Now they're going to, let's just create hostilities between people. So yeah, like I've kind of rambled a little bit off the original point, but yeah, I think that this is why the kind of stuff you're talking about is so important. Like it needs to be a spiritual awakening at the same time as a awakening to like reality and to kind of like what's real in the world. It also needs to have the spiritual component as well, not just okay, they're doing this bad stuff and they're all evil, but like, oh, they're doing this bad stuff and they're all evil, and I also need to transcend within myself so that this doesn't happen again. Because this stuff happened because we got too comfortable and we got too lazy, and we handed over, we didn't do the hard work in our own life. Everyone just wanted the easy life, so we ended up with bad people, rather than saying, no, I'm going to do the hard work in my own life. I'm going to actually like try to undertake spiritual practices, or read or learn about philosophy, learn about ethics, whatever it is, whatever that expression is. But when we don't do the work, we shouldn't be surprised that we get these evil people in power who have malign incentives.
Yep, definitely. I mean, I suppose in a sense, it's all theatre. The way that I see it is that it's all theatre. It's all an act. It's all a charade. The whole thing is just orchestrated theatre, and it's very very cleverly done, and propagandized, and Edward Bernays, nephew of Freud. I mean, they know what they're doing. And so, yes, there is that level of they know intentionally what they're doing. But who are they? Who are they? Who are you? Who am I? This is the deeper spiritual. So there's the level in which we can see this theatre and this game from a material perspective. In which case we'll probably argue this and argue that about politics, and this would be the right thing to, and then we're just perpetuating the same thing, because now, like, even when you're arguing with somebody, you're pitching yourself against somebody. It's like for me, the reason why I say it's a spiritual, and I even really don't like the spiritual classification term spiritual, because to me it's actually all spiritual. So like in Indian philosophy, there's a principle called Maya, and the illusion. And so just imagine we were in a physical space together. You could see me physically sitting across the room, or you can see your chair, your microphone, and all the rest of it. These things look like they're real and they're solid, and they are we're separate from them in some sense. But that's not the truth. Okay, yes, if I was to get a brick thrown at you, it would probably hurt. But it is not separate from you at a fundamental level. A bit in the way that, like, a wave arises from the ocean. Is the wave separate from the ocean? Are all the other waves, which are seemingly separate from each other, separate from the very thing that forms them? And so this is the illusion. We're just waves looking out across the top of the ocean and seeing loads of different waves. But actually what we're missing is the very thing that makes me up in the first place is in everything. God is in everything. God is the ocean, and God is also the waves and the expression that's on the ocean. And it's like a biofeedback system. So because we've fallen away from understanding this, that we're part of God and we're expressions of God and living peacefully as waves on the ocean with each other, some silly bugger decided at some point it was going to be, no, I'm in fear of, like, I'm on my own, I've got to dominate this, or however it started. Some political, economic, spiritual game started, and now we are paying the repercussions of that. And that's the great fall, where we've fallen to a degree that actually we're so lost in the narratives that we've forgotten that we're not separate from each other. We're intrinsically linked at a very deep level, and that's the spiritual nature of things. When you get past the illusion of Maya, it's like seeing through the game, like seeing through after COVID, seeing the malevolence, and they can no longer gaslight you. Once you've seen through the layer of the material is not quite what it is. It's not a substance. It's definitely real. It's only partly real. There's definitely a wave in front of you, but it's only partly true. There's something deeper, and you can only really connect with that and understand it from your heart. You can't understand it intellectually. You can't understand it cognitively. In fact, the brain can't go there. The brain, it's only when the brain stops having conceptual thought about what it actually is that we experience it, and you get into the heart and you actually feel it, then a lot of this, what I'm saying, probably makes a lot more sense. Because
Mm.
and so for me, people like Tony Blair, Bill Gates, and all the other people, they're actually projections from this deep ocean of consciousness as waves on the ocean, because we've got unresolved karma. We've created them in some way. Like we create the demons because we carry them inside ourselves. That's why having to go within, having to find the solution within yourself, it's almost like switches that off. And eventually they will die and dissipate, and hopefully if we've collectively resolved the karma, we will be birthed into a new wave of civilization, a new way of living, and each of us will live that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. It kind of reminds me a little bit. I at one point learned to like I taught myself to lucid dream. I found a book when I was in university about lucid dreaming in the library. And I was like, God, this sounds interesting. I read this book and it has these practices about like how to do it. I don't know if you've ever explored this yourself, but like lucid dreaming, it's just like it's amazing. It's like, having the most incredible psychedelic trip you could have without any psychedelics. You're just doing it with your own
Yeah,
mind. It's unbelievable. But
yeah,
for a while, it's a practice you have to keep up. When you stop the practices and the kind of like exercises to learn to do it, you kind of lose it again. So I don't do it much now. But one of the things that there was these researchers were doing is people who were having like nightmares, like people who had kind of like traumas and stuff, and they were having recurring nightmares. They were teaching them to lucid dream, and they were basically doing all these exercises. And when they were experiencing these nightmares, and they're experiencing this fear and all of the rest of it, they were basically taught to first of all recognize it's a dream. That's like the first thing, is to recognize you're in a dream. So it's to see the signs, recognize your environment, be like, I've seen this before. Okay, I'm dreaming. And then the second thing was whatever it was that was, if it's let's say it's a wolf that's attacking you, or let's say that it's someone who's trying to kill you, is to have it melt away by loving that thing, loving that entity or that whatever it is in the dream that's, turning that fear into love. And it's kind of like those things are kind of both what we need to apply in this as well. It's like, first of all, is recognizing all of this is coming from the same source. Like, all of this is some kind of an illusion that, it's an illusion which is experienced, it's an illusion which is felt, but nonetheless, it's not the real essence of everything. Everything comes from the energy behind it, not the just the physical plane. And then the second is to kind of, I guess, recognize, like you were saying before, learn to have some kind of love even for your enemy, to learn that that person is how they are through, whether it's a manifestation of some kind of collective karma or whether it's a manifestation of their own hurt or harm in the past. Like, you don't have to be kind to them. You can still like fight them on things, but kind of like recognizing things from a bit more of a deeper level rather than just responding and reacting and just saying, bad person, I'm gonna, scream and shout about this. It's kind of learning to see it with a bit more of a wider perspective. I think those ideas like go hand in hand. I often think that dreams are a very, very good reflection for how the world operates. Like I use it as an analogy a lot for like how I think the world operates. It's like we don't know how we got here. We emerge into this kind of consciousness somehow, similar to like a dream. Like in a dream, you're suddenly in the dream, and you could ask someone in a dream, how did you get here? And you won't know. You're experiencing it. You believe it to be real life, but you don't really know how you get there. And it's similar to like the real life. We're here in this world. We emerged into it. We don't really know where we were or have necessarily an understanding of where we were before we came into it or where we'll go after, but we emerged into it. And then we interact with each other and other people and other things in the world. And we have these energetic things that occur, but it's not the real thing. Like we know we came from, we know there's something outside of this. We don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but something brought it into existence. And that's the real thing. So yeah, maybe that should be my final ramble away from the point because I keep forgetting where I started all of this. But it sounds like some of the spiritual teachings you're talking about, the Maya concept. I really like that, and I really do think that it has a lot of applicability when it comes to dealing with these things. And ultimately is what we've got to go back to, I think, like old ways of doing things, like, just going out and protesting or going and, flaming on Twitter and whatever, like they're not working. Like either they've never worked or they're certainly not working now. So, something more needs to be done. And I think that people are ready in light of everything that's happened over the past few years to step into something a bit greater than before. I kind of feel like a lot of people, a switch has been turned or whatever, however you want to term it. There's been a watershed moment. And I think people are ready to not just try out new ideas, but actually look back at ideas from the past and take wisdom from that as well.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Johnny, have you noticed synchronicities in your life? Odd meetings with people that have been instrumental. It's like, oh, just you met your soul connection, a soul friend, or whatever. Have you noticed any of that?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I feel like when I made, quite a firm decision in like when COVID was happening and I made the decision to leave the UK, and I didn't really have any idea where life was going to take me after that. I just sensed that I needed to get out. I was in London at that time and I had a very strong aversion to wanting to be there. And really, since that moment, everything that I've done, I felt quite a strong degree of like certainty about it, about things that are the right decision. I mean, everything from kind of like first of all going to Mexico and starting my podcast, and certain people I've had on the podcast as well. I was saying to you before, I am very selective about who I have on the podcast, and I always need to feel that the conversation is the right one for the time. And I don't want to kind of like force conversations or force guests that don't feel like authentic. It needs to be at the right time. And then just meeting great people along the way and just kind of developing deeper connections, like with like obviously Mike's become like a close friend of mine. And like me and Mike did a really great episode as well with Seb Lee, the Corona Cure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but you'd probably have a great conversation with him as well. Like really like interesting guy into kind of a lot of these spiritual ideas as well. And then, like these kind of conversations with yourself. I just feel like since everything's happened with COVID, I've kind of met like people who I would say is my tribe. Like I've obviously got my friends and my family who I've always had, and they're great, and they're, like I love them to bits. But it's really nice to have these other people who've come into my life who I actually feel like really see the world on a similar level and understand it on a similar level than I do. And I can have conversations that maybe will be a bit lost in other areas of my life. And that's okay. That is no like harm done there if I can't necessarily have that conversation with everyone. But it's really nice to be able to have conversations like this with people who really get it, And I think that probably the people who are listening to me as well, if they've listened this far into the podcast, they probably sense that as well. Like I think that I hope they're coming along with me on this journey that I'm, going on and tuning in and being like, oh, okay, like I'm feeling that as well. Because yeah, I'm having a lot of weird conversations, put it that way.
Well, don't be afraid of the weird, because look, the old conventions that we've lived by, these are the things that are breaking down. These are the things that were restricting us. So the reason I asked you about it, the synchronicities, is because, look, there is something happening. There's a level beyond your orchestration or my orchestration when these things happen. I mean, maybe you think, I'll make the decision, I'll go to that coffee shop there, I'll have a coffee. Then you go there and actually you bump into somebody who you've not seen for years, or a new and something amazing comes out of it. So who orchestrated that? Did you orchestrate it, or did you just have the idea that, or the impulse, I must go, or was something nudging you to go to the coffee shop? What I'm trying to get at is there is, in face of this Leviathan, which seems to control everything, wants to go even crazier. They want to like have you hooked up to the mainframe, so that you're like, you typically are like something out of the Matrix, where you're plugged in your little bath and they'll feed you your Soylent Green and all the like that. It's so dystopian, but like in face of that, this synchronicity is where God works, right? Where the goodness works. This is what they can't stop. Is this level of spiritual orchestration at a different level than the material, which they wish to control. And that's why they have to gaslight you with narratives. When you choose not to buy into those and you choose to follow your heart, You actually then have these impulses, and you get to, oh, I feel like I should go and do this today. You want to have a more loving experience. Bang, poof, all magic. The cosmos works it out. The synchronicity happens. The events happen. That is our way out of this. Is actually, as I said, go within. It's not just to free yourself and free your heart and free your mind, but it's actually to also, when you're aligned with that, you add to this collective orchestration, and everybody meets each other. That's the one thing they can't control. The goodness of people's own hearts and minds. We're very, very powerful beings. I don't mean that in their sense of power. They want the power to have all the money to control all the world. I mean, we are very powerful beings in that we create our reality. We can create our reality. And that's another thing they want to rob us of. Is when we talk about sovereignty, so there's a lot of stuff about sovereignty right now. What does that mean? Well, I just want the freedom to exist on the earth and walk around and say what I want and do it. No, it's much deeper than that. It's the sovereignty of your heart being free with this orchestration, with the divine, with goodness. When you've freed your heart, when you've freed your mind so much that you can act as a powerful agent in this dimension, like the wave on the ocean. Now you know that you are both the wave and the ocean. There's no doubting, no illusion in your mind anymore. You can see so clearly what the game is. Now you've got incredible power. Now you're acting sovereign. You're acting as a sovereign being in this game. You're almost like a king on the chessboard, right? So there's the problem. But when they attach ego to it, which is what they do, what you do, you think you are the king. You want to control everything there because you reach this level of awakening that they feel, and their tradition wants them to be kings and gods. When you recognize you're just a fragment of and part of this amazing thing we might call God, this energy that's given birth to everything in which you're part of, then you truly align to a different internet. You're plugged into God's www, and that they cannot touch. They can only disturb your heart. They can only play with your narratives in your mind. And if you allow your heart to get unsettled and you believe in the stories other than what your direct intuition tells you, then you're likely to get lost, and you're going to think that you can solve it by material, getting together on a march or a protest or sending a bit into that's theatre. It's no amount of protesting to these people is going to change. It will not stop. You've got to end the game inside ourselves, and we've got to unite at a different order, level, a different frequency, which is more akin to our sovereign spiritual truth.
Yeah. That was really nice, Hoshin. That was a awesome little section there, and I feel like it's probably a good point to start rounding up on, because we've kind of danced around a lot of areas in this conversation, and but I think that really gets to the heart of it. It really gets to the crux of everything we've been discussing. So it's a good point to probably start rounding up. But first of all, just thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know that you have like connection issues and all the rest of it up there, but I'm so glad that we did this, because I feel like this conversation has been every bit as fruitful as I'd hoped. So thanks so much. And obviously shout out to Parallel Mike for, helping to facilitate this one by passing on your information. And like I said, I will put that link in the description for people. So before we part ways, do you want to just let my kind of listening audience or viewing audience, if this one goes eventually out on video as well, just let them know, where they can find you and all the rest of it, and keep in touch, and also just any kind of parting words or wisdom that you have as well.
So, well, first of all, thank you, a lot, Johnny. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for asking me to chat with you, and to your listeners, if they want to know a little bit more about what I'm doing. The website is currently down. It's sort of having a bit of a revamp. I'm restructuring it. So, but it is 3 W's HeartMind. So that's heart as in your chest, and mind as in your brain. HeartMind.org.uk. or I have an Instagram page where I show what I'm doing here, just to share it with my friends, and that's HeartMind underscore UK. So that's the ways that people can reach me. I don't know that there's any more I can say. I think I've said as much as I could say to your listeners. But what I would say is, don't lose hope, because I think this is the one thing. It's probably going to get a lot more scary going forward. And if you've ever watched a horror movie where you wanted to get out, and you should have probably left the cinema at that point. It just gets worse a little bit before it gets better, before you can actually get out of the cinema. All right. So I think we are going to see a lot more going forward. I hope that some of what we have talked about today helps people, as I say, to navigate what's going to come, not buy into this, and realize that in whatever way, you believe spiritual to be, please just go into your heart, listen to your heart a lot more deeply, and be honest with yourself about everything. And don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up for your failings, for your delusions, for all the things. Just pray, actually. Pray. Prayer is a very, very powerful mechanism for change of the energy within ourselves and for the world. So actually go into your heart honestly, and pray for guidance, and pray for love in your life, and watch it. You will not be disappointed. That's all I can say. So on that, I shall thank you so much again, Johnny, for your invite, and thanks to Mike again.
Yeah, thank you, Hoshin. Let's do this again sometime.
Bless you. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.